Good afternoon, everybody. We're just about to begin. Thank you all for your time, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Melissa Lecoq. I'm Deputy Director at UNEP-WCMC. And I think, as many of you know, convening is really at the heart of what UNEP-WCMC does and what UNEP does. So this project has been incredibly exciting for us to be a part of it. So in terms of convening, we have long experience in this. UNEP brings together thousands of people, I think you all know, around the world each year. For example, we're going to have the UN Environment Assembly at the end of the year, which I hope some of you will attend, where almost 8,000 people are going to come together, representing our member states as well as other stakeholders, to deliberate on our next 4-year strategy, but also to negotiate and agree resolutions that'll guide the way UNEP operates going forward for the next couple of years. At UNEP-WCMC, of course, we also have a long history of convening, having brought together most recently more than 200 people at the Nature Action Dialogues. And I say this just to frame why we were so keen to engage in this project and why we're very grateful for the support. And I think, as everybody knows, ecosystem restoration is an incredibly important part of addressing the triple planetary crisis that we face today: ecosystem degradation, climate change, pollution, and of course, biodiversity loss. This project has brought together a diverse range of stakeholders. We've already seen a lot of very useful guidance coming out of it. And one of the important insights that Anushri and team have shared with me already is that convening people around restoration isn't so much as just the products that you come out with, but very importantly, the actual journey that you go on, the journey to co-create something, the journey where you have these diverse stakeholders, but you're bringing them together around a common vision and a common goal. And I personally am really excited to hear more about these insights in our session today. So having said all of that, welcome everyone. Thank you for spending your Wednesday afternoon with us. I'll just move on to the agenda quickly.
There's a clicker on that.
That was the one question I didn't want to. Okay, so the agenda today, we've got David Thomas, who's the program director from the Endangered Landscapes and Seascapes program, who will be giving opening remarks. Then Anushri from UNEP-WCMC, followed by Laura from UNEP-WCMC, Pushendra from BirdLife International, and then Rodrigo, and then Melissa Leach will kindly close the session for us. Thank you very much. Just in terms of a code of conduct, I do want to draw everyone's attention to the code of conduct. It's really just to ensure that we have a very fruitful and useful and enjoyable session today. So I'm not going to read through it, but please do bear it in mind as we progress today. Thank you very much. And over to David. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. So as Melissa said, I'm the director of the Endangered Landscapes and Seascapes program. So I just want to make my own welcome to everyone, both in the room and online. I don't know how many people we've got online, but I think we have a fair few who were registered. So this event, as we said, is convening for restoration, some of the kind of shared insights from the program. Melissa's talked about convening very much from the perspective of the strength and purpose of UNEP-WCMC, but it's also something that we maybe could be doing more of in this building, convening amongst ourselves and sharing the experience, the diverse experiences that we have to address some of these really big, critical problems that face us today, to do with biodiversity loss, to do with environmental degradation, to do with climate change. So one part of this initiative was to support convening across the CCI partners. The other side was to support convening outside the building. So the more voices and the more diverse experiences and sets of expertise that we can get to address some of these challenges, the better. And the more that we can come together to present a common front on some of these issues, the stronger we become. So this this particular project, it began in 2003, and it took as its starting point a paper that many of you, if you work in restoration in Europe, will be familiar with, published by Giulia Cortini-Segara, which surveyed 145 experts from 18 countries across Europe, asking them the question, what are the biggest barriers to achieving large-scale restoration across Europe. And the results of that was published, as I say, in 2021, were the things that came up at the top, the three main things. One, maybe not surprisingly, you might wonder why you had to ask 145 individuals to answer this question, was insufficient funding. The second one was conflicting interests amongst stakeholders, so social issues. And the third one was a lack of policy support and policy coherence, which really supported landscape scale restoration. So this project took those three issues as the starting point to say, bring people together to try and answer the question, what are the solutions to addressing these barriers, and to begin to propose how they might be addressed and develop tools for that purpose. So the project was convened and kind of organised by three of the partners from CCI, so UNEP-WCMC, the Royal Society for Protection of Birds, RSPB, and BirdLife International. So they came together, as I say, and as a result of that project, they produced a number of key outputs through convening. The convening took place internally through the community of practice on landscape restoration, landscape and seascape restoration. I hope that many of you in this building, I see some familiar faces from some of the meetings that have taken place over the course of the last couple of years. So that working group, community of practice, was really created and supported in these early days as a result of this project, kind of moderated and convened by organisers. Externally and internally, that was brought together with two task teams, one working on the issue of the finance and one on the social dimensions. And as I said, those two task teams, that project has produced two major outputs, reports, sets of guidelines, one addressing the finance question and one addressing the stakeholder question. And that's what we're going to hear more about today. Obviously, the outputs, the direct outputs, are a kind of key feature of this project. They're a measure of its success, and the uptake of those will be a measure of success. But we also take, and again, Melissa has referred to it, the process, the convening process, how well this project brought people together, both from within this building and outside this building. And I think we'll hear more about some of the organisations that were convened externally when these particular outputs are talked about and the contributors are acknowledged. Okay, I mean, I'm going to hand straight over to Anushri now, but once again, welcome to everyone to this, this seminar.
Much everyone, and thank you to David. I am gonna jump straight in to my presentation. And Melissa and David have made my life very easy by setting the scene, so I can go right into talking about what is convening and what we did under the project. So like David said, my name is Anushri Bhattacharjee. I lead the Restoration for Sustainable Development Focal Initiative at UNEP-WCMC. I'm also the project lead of the convening project, so it was my joy and pleasure and challenging role to bring all of this together with excellent team members all across. To jump straight into it, what do we mean by convening? If we look at the dictionary definition, people say convening is to arrange people to come together for a formal meeting. So people often use it to convene a meeting, to convene a board meeting. Often in the last couple of years, we've heard convening being used a lot more when talking about workshops or meetings like this. So I could very easily say I've convened Cambridge Conservation Initiative members and external members to come together into this seminar. But is that what convening really is? And is that what we are talking about when we say convening? Because if we say convening a workshop or convening a meeting, we could very easily say we organized a workshop. So what is convening? So as we understood the journey of what convening was, as a project team, we had to come to this common understanding. And what we decided that This was done from the scoping period. This was something that was enforced and understood as something that was a journey that the project secretariat with the steering committee and the task force members and the community of practice came to, is that true convening brings together these diverse stakeholders around a common vision, a common purpose, and works on a journey towards a specific action. So it can't just be coming together in a meeting where we all get together, have a good time, share learnings, and go away. It needs to be towards something. It needs to be as much about the journey, like David and Melissa have said, as about the destination. So the outputs coming out from the project are exciting, but what we've done as part of the process of getting to these guidances is, in my mind, equally important, if not more. The other bit that we need to remember is that having convening powers like UNEP has, as UNEP-WCMC has, as all the members at CCI have, but also CCI is this catalyzing power. We are talking about bringing together substantive collaboration between diverse stakeholders. And often something to remember is that these are stakeholders who may not always have the opportunity to interact with one another, who may not always be at the same table, who may not be always in the same room. So it is bringing together these different groups of people to come together, to work together, to collaborate together towards producing something that did not exist before. And to an extent, the project has done that. And that's what the Convening for Registration project was all about. So in a snapshot, we focused a lot on the convening abilities of CCI, our individual member organizations and beyond, to bring together groups of people from different stakeholder groups, from finance sector, from policy sector, both at the EU level and at the national government level, from conservation and restoration sectors, from academia, and we brought them together around a table, and we focused a lot on in-person convening events, because that's when a lot of the good conversations happened, and we saw and facilitated that exchange of ideas and knowledge. And like David said very quickly, this came from trying to co-create and understand and come up with guidances that we would work with others. So it wasn't just created by UNEP-WCMC or BirdLife International or RSPB, but we worked beyond our network and we reached out to people that we normally may not have worked with. And we co-created together these guidances that looked at the insufficient funding for restoration, that looked at the conflicting stakeholder interests, and that looked at the enabling policy environment. So, like others have said before me, so I won't spend too much time on this, except stress that the aim of the project was to strengthen the dialogue between the restoration stakeholders across the different groups and to jointly identify what could be some of the solutions to overcome the barriers. So there is no one magic bullet. So we are not saying from the project, today you can go out and suddenly get millions of dollars of funding. We are not saying that suddenly all the conflict will disappear, but we are saying this is a step towards the journey. And like David said, we are really excited to share this with all of you, and we'll have colleagues from BirdLife and UNEP-WCMC will be talking a little bit more about the guidance, about the learnings that we had ourselves from this process. And we really look forward to you engaging with those guidances and coming back to us and telling us what you thought about it. What do you think would be the next step? So we look at the convening as something that we are just beginning to, it's not the end of our journey, it's the start of a new journey then. So as David very quickly said, there was the inward convening with the community of practice, which was quite interesting because when we started this in 2023, and my colleague Laura will be talking about it a bit more, we were not sure if there was enough of an appetite, even though we knew that CCI had the priority area 2, which was on restoration. But we expected maybe 15-20 people would sign up in 2023 when we sent out the expression of interest. We had 30 people sign out at the first instance, and now the number has grown to, I think, over 70, maybe close to 90. Yes, so it was 70 maybe 3 months back, so it's 90 now. So that's grown quite a bit. So it's more than what we had initially imagined during the scoping period, but also during the implementation period. And what that did is that We started off with the aim to mobilize the restoration expertise within CCI, but then we expanded on that. So we introduced scope creep into the project where we said, we do not want to gatekeep and say that this is only for people with expertise on restoration. Anyone with an interest in restoration should also be part of the community of practice. And that's what we've done. And that's what we've seen. A lot of people come together, a lot of the students that we have from the University of Cambridge, from the MPhil program. We've seen a lot of participation from all the member organizations, and we've had multiple events around the convening internally at CCI that you'll hear from in the next presentation. We've had the 2 task forces that David talked about, and that has been on stakeholder engagement and on finance for restoration. And again, this has been quite a journey because these were task forces that comprised of people within CCI networks from ELSP grantees, but also external experts. So we reached out to people that we hadn't collaborated with before, and we invited to be part of the task forces. We had some people who couldn't be part of the task force, but then they agreed to stay on and have bilateral conversations with us. And then we went beyond. So what did the task forces do? As a quick example, they met, both of them, they deliberated and they scoped their topics. Since these were very busy people volunteering their own time, we decided that it was okay if that was hybrid. We couldn't always get people in the building at the DAB, and that was fine. There was a pre-scoping exercise, there was a scoping exercise, and that's where the task forces narrowed down what each of their focus would be. Because talking about, for instance, finance for restoration is so huge. Where do you start? And we do not want to produce a generic guidance. We want it to be something that would be used by people who need it. So there was that scoping just to identify what is the gap, who needs what. And we carried out a stakeholder mapping exercise. The mapping exercise looked at who the project needs to convene, who we need to be informing, who we need to be influencing, who we need to be engaging with. Based on that, we also helped identify what the focus of the guidance would be. So, for instance, for the stakeholder engagement task force, the focus became very much around just and effective and fair stakeholder engagement for landscape restoration in Europe. For the finance for restoration, the focus became around private finance because we realized everybody keeps talking about private finance as the magic bullet that's going to close the finance gap that exists for conservation restoration. What nobody essentially is telling the project developers on the ground is what do you need to know, what do you need to do in order to access this private finance. So that became very much the focus of that task force. Then we went out. Think of this as a spoken hub model. We had the project secretariat, we had the task forces, then we went beyond. And we started convening these diverse relevant stakeholders that we had identified in the mapping exercise through targeted events. And this was something that was not in the original scoping design. I think we had initially thought maybe we could do a workshop at the DAB, invite people here and use the convening ability of CCI to just get people here. Looking at the logistics, we changed our strategy quite a bit, which worked out, we feel, quite well for the project. Instead of getting people to come to us, we decided to go where the stakeholders were. So we had workshops at the DAB, but we also went at the Nature Action Dialogues that Melissa talked about, which had business sector, and we brought the conservation restoration practitioners there. We went to the 14th European Conference on ecological restoration organized by SER at Estonia last year, and we brought a lot of the finance policy people there. And there was deliberations that happened at those events. I think we started off by wanting maybe 2 events per task force, ended up with 5 events at SER itself, and 2 more across the 2 other task forces. And then we came back and we listed what we learned from these conversations. And we wrote that up, we edited that, and we gathered inputs and case studies from the task force members towards these 2 guidances. And that task force also helped us come up with the communication and dissemination plan for the projects. And that's where you might have seen a lot of communication that has been produced already from the project and some others going forward. So very quickly, these were the convening that we did. It would be very remiss of me if I didn't talk about the communication and the coordination that happened across CCI, ELSP, BirdLife, RSPB, and UNEP-WCMC around not just the launch of the project, but also the guidance launches. So we've also been very fortunate that we reached out outside of our network. So everything that we published or promoted has also been picked up by the Society of Ecological Restoration, both the global and the European chapters. They've been published on the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration websites, and the playbook that the Finance Task Force produced actually is published as a UN Decade resource as well, and is on their website. And similarly, we've had the Global Partnership on Forest and Landscape Restoration, who's again picked up everything that we've done and has promoted and launched it. So it's really gone broad, and we've reached a wider network than just CCI. And this is just a snapshot of some of the coordination that has happened across the comms teams, across all these 4 partner organizations. Very quickly, what did we learn? So this is a blog that was just published as of today. So if you want to look at it, my colleague will also be sharing it in the chat. We can send it around afterwards, and you can have a look at the QR code. This shares what did we learn through the convening from these 4 organizations. And very quickly, convening is very, 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 very hard. It is very difficult to bring everyone together. It needs to have this common vision and purpose. It's very easy to get lost and try and do too many things, or to do too many high-level generic things. Sometimes you need to remember what that common vision and purpose is. It needs intentional and deliberate engagement, which meant everyone that we engaged as part of the convening was targeted. We had task force members who were invited and targeted, but we also had people at the convening workshops that we had invited. It was the perfect mix of policy, finance, and restoration around the table. We stayed up at night, just the workshop before, trying to get that group going, and some of times the workshops were oversubscribed, and we realized in a breakout group we needed a particular number, we needed to have a particular mix, so we worked really hard to get that engagement. It needs resources, it needs time, it needs the manpower, it needs the people behind it, it needs patience. You need to know that not everything as you think it should happen. You need to know that convening takes, again, time and manpower and patience, and remembering this common journey and what's the point of all of this. It needs great facilitation and people management. A colleague of mine called it cat herding skills the other day. I am very tempted to now put this on a CV somewhere, but it really requires that ability to bring all these different groups of people, because they are coming with different perspectives, and they are coming with different visions, and they are coming with different mandates. So getting the common ground across these different groups of people, even within the project secretariat, can sometimes be challenging. And then we are trying to do this at such a massive scale. I started the other day, and I think as a convening, we've reached out to 350 plus people as part of the dissemination and other dialogues. That's been another 200 people. So easily we've reached to, as part of the project in 2 years, we've spoken to 500, 600 people easily. It needs this collaborative spirit. It's not a project that's owned by UNEP-WCMC or ELSP or BirdLife or RSPB. We're looking at it and branding it as a CCI level project, and it needs that sharing of credit and knowing what it is that the project needs, going beyond our individual organizations. It needs to be flexible. Nothing in this project, I think, went exactly as per plan, but we adapted. And sometimes we made the best of the situation. It needed that learning mindset. We went in knowing that we were not the experts, which is why we got task force members, but not necessarily would they all be experts, which is why we went convening beyond them. So we learned from every interaction that we had, and we moved away from we need to know everything now and produce it ourselves. And we went into a proactive and opportunity mindset instead of being in a reactive mindset all the time. So it needed a mental shift for all of us to know that things are not going to go according to plan. And at the very end, we needed to remember what it was that we were working towards and not lose ourselves as part of that journey. So thank you so much. That's the Whistle Stop Tour. If you have any questions on the project, do reach out to me, and I will next pass on the floor to my colleague Laura to talk about the community of practice. Thank you.
Nursery. My name is Laura Neri. I'm a program officer at UNEP-WCMC, and I will present you the key insight from the CCI community of practice on ecosystem restoration. So, as you know, the CCI COP is part of the Convening project and aims to bring together expertise and interest on ecosystem restoration across CCI to drive the global restoration agenda forward. It also contributes to the CCI strategic plan, priority area 2 on restoring land and seascapes for life. On top of that, the CCI COP also aims to create opportunities to exchange knowledge and discuss on key restoration topics, gain a better understanding of the CCI work on restoration, share projects of interest, and amplify the impact on ongoing projects, and finally foster future collaboration. In terms of working, our community usually meets once a month or every 2 months during an hour. And we also welcome potential any ad hoc meetings on relevant topics and opportunities. And who are the members of this community? So members of the CCI organizations who have expertise, experience, or an interest in restoration. And here it's important to highlight that everyone is welcome and you don't need to be an expert on the topic, as mentioned by my colleague Anushree. On top of that, is meant to be inclusive and diversity with representation from all the CCI organizations, but no obligation for any members or organizations to join. All members participate on a pro bono basis, and in terms of time commitment required for members is flexible. So all members, they can contribute as much as they want and are able to at any given time. And members can also participate full-time or engage in a specific topics of interest. So as we reach over a year and a half since we started this community of practice, I will just highlight some key insights and see some key numbers that we have. So as my colleague Anushree mentioned, we start over with 30 members, and now we are over 90 members on the mailing list. And since the kickoff meeting in October 2023, we had 14 meetings and 2 workshops, one of them focusing on the future of the CCI community of practice, but another one focusing on managing stakeholder conflicts in restoration. Besides, we also had 1 happy hour screening the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration documentaries Restore, and followed by drinks after, which was a great opportunity for networking among the CCI members. And we also had a wide range of CCI and external partners presenting during this over a year and a half. So, for example, Traffic, WCS, National Trust, and many others that you can see here on my presentation. In terms of topics, as I said, we had a kickoff meeting in October 2023, and then we had meetings dedicated to develop the term of reference, which was developed in a participatory way with all members being engaged in this process. And we also took the opportunity to get to know more about the members and their interests. After that, we had some showcasing CCI restoration work meetings, which we opened the floor to all the CCI COP members to present and talk about their work, followed by a session on the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And we also had some sessions dedicated to specific ecosystems, as you can see here, on marine, coastal, and riparian ecosystem, on forest, woodland, grassland, and so on. We also had a specific session on the finance for restoration, talking about the task force and the output they produced. And finally, our last meeting was a recap and a future outlook of the CCI, just talking about our main achievements and how to see this community going further. And as one of the mechanisms to ensure that the CCI COP lives beyond this project, we set up the coordination group. And it has been set up with members from different CCI organizations that are already part of the community of practice. And again, participation is voluntary and open to all COP members. And this group will discuss topics, dates, and explore different formats for the upcoming meetings. The chairing and meeting facilitation of the future COP meetings will also rotate among the members of this group. And of course, UNEP-WCMC, BirdLife International, RSPB, and then we'll be providing ongoing support over the next year and detailed guidance on how to organize those meetings. Apart of that, we also have a dedicated Teams channel to enhance communication among the CCI members with a separate channel for the coordination group. And on Teams, you also have a resource folders where you can find all the information about this community of practice and also the presentations that were delivered there. And so finally, during this 1.5 years, we learned that there is a strong appetite within the CCI for COP on ecosystem restoration, as mentioned by my colleague Anashri. We saw the huge increase in the number of members over the years. And of course, convening requires effective coordination, as was mentioned before, requires resources, including time and financial resources as well. For this specific community of practice, we need someone to send out the invites, to talk to people, to get external speakers, and to keep this community going. As we know, restoration is a broad topic with multiple angles. And we believe this community represents an opportunity for knowledge sharing and awareness of cross-CCI initiatives. And during our last meeting, we shared some insights from the survey we had. And a lot of people highlighted this space as an opportunity to learn more and get to understand more about what's going on in the CCI. And finally, we believe the CCI COP provides a convening umbrella that is driven by individuals who are willing to take this community beyond the convening project towards a self-sustaining community of practice on ecosystem restoration. We are very happy with the engagement, and we are positive that this community of practice on ecosystem restoration will live beyond this project and will continue over the years. That's all from my side. Thank you so much. And I'm happy to hand over to my colleague, Prashendra.
So thank you very much. My name is Prashendra Satel, Senior Policy Manager at BirdLife International, and I was part of the Stakeholder Engagement Task Force, as a member as well. So I'm going to walk through the work of Stakeholder Engagement Task Force. Some of the things we discussed were the barriers, what would be the enablers, and some of the key recommendations in ensuring that ecological restoration is not only about being it more effective in terms of ecological aspect, but also how we can address the social aspect as well. So we focus on the policy barriers as well as some of the social barriers, and in terms of the stakeholder, the format of the stakeholder engagement task force, we had obviously most of the CCI members as well as some of the grantees of the ELSP program, but that network also expanded beyond other interested members from the academia as well as some of the practitioners, NGOs, INGOs as well. So in terms of the aim was to better understand what are the different barriers, mostly focusing on the stakeholder engagement, also managing different conflicting interests of the stakeholders, and then also come up with, co-create some of the solutions in terms of addressing those barriers. In terms of the different actions, obviously we had monthly meetings, regular meetings, and then also in the initial days, we focus in terms of sharing some of the aspect about what are the existing tools and then how we can come up with the better way to address some of the aspect of stakeholder engagement. So it was a knowledge exchange as well as coming up with the how we can address further. And this also was an opportunity for us to discuss about some of the convening interventions and outputs as well. So, for example, one of the outputs that we're finalizing is around the guidance document for practitioners. So a key milestone for us was to organize a CCI workshop on managing stakeholder conflict right here in this very room in July 2024. we had 33 different participants from over 17 organizations. And we shared among the task force members. So for example, some of the things we said was around some of the toolkit in terms of how we can transform conflict into cooperation based on the available literature review as well as the previous experience. And similarly, from University of East Anglia, they had this Just Restoration Toolkit curriculum, and then also the collaboration between University of Edinburgh and Cambridge University, which is around developing restoration practitioner development toolkit. And then we applied these into the real case of the EU nature restoration regulation in terms of the policy context, as well as the practical case study in a landscape level. And one of the key discussion we came up with was how we can transform, if conflict is around, incompatibilities, and addressing how we can address and change competing claims as well as incompatibilities in terms of interest, goals, and vision towards more shared goal and compatible goals. So that was the major area of discussion for us. And then we convened 3 different sessions during the Society for Ecological Restoration events in Estonia. So one was around equitable and effective stakeholder engagement and co-produced solutions. This was in collaboration with the University of Alicante, including Jody Cortina himself as well. And there were different 9 presentations showcasing different approaches to stakeholder engagement across Europe. And the other one was a dedicated workshop focusing on, again, managing different types of the stakeholder conflicts. We had more than 30 participants, representation from government, NGOs, academia, restoration practitioners, and private sector, as well as farmers as well. And there are various countries represented there as well. Then one of the convening events was around we had the synthesis session. Most of the convening for restoration session, as well as it was in collaboration with the ELSP. Some of the ELSP grantees were there as well. And we coordinated the breakout group on stakeholder engagement. Actually, some of the outputs, this has led to the collaborative co-produced output in the restoration ecology, led by Nancy Appenden. So this was the 3rd event that we contributed to as well. So a key output that is coming out from this task force is a guidance document for restoration practitioner, which focuses on just and effective engagement. So basically, it highlights why just and effective engagement matters in the context of landscape restoration. And what are the key barriers? We break down into individual barriers and then come up with the enablers and provide some actionable recommendation for practitioners. And we focus on 3 thematic areas. So the adequate policy environment, participation, inclusive stakeholder participation, and managing conflict. And one of the key highlights is that we have 6 different case studies from across Europe. And accompanying to this guidance document, we are also producing a policy brief targeted for regional and national policymakers in Europe. That is being led by BirdLife Central and Europe and Central Asia team. So in terms of the key learnings, to summarize, in the beginning, because I am based in the global policy team, I volunteered to be a task force member. So many of the other task force members were also volunteering their time. So I was not quite sure about the engagement, but it was good to see that the engagement had been, throughout the task force meetings, there was a increasing engagement, and we managed to sustain the momentum. So despite the voluntary time, people got interested on the topic. And then there was more enhanced collaboration as well. Actually, some of the collaboration that we had during the task force, we had been able to build on that and also scale up other contexts. For example, I was in a trip to Liberia to in a project, what we call the Seascapes or just Seascapes, so just restoration with the University of India. So this has continued, and we are also thinking about how we can sustain the community of practice through the task force that we created beyond the project cycle. So that is one of the key learning. The second is also because of the diversity and interdisciplinary team we had from the academia to different NGOs working from the national level to local level to international level, it provided rich and varied perspective to produce the outputs. So that was a very useful experience as well. The other thing I would like to highlight is a beautiful co-benefit of getting involved in the project is that it has helped mainstream the importance of social issues, including aspect of equity, justice within BirdLife among the other team members as well. So because obviously BirdLife and partners, we are more environmental practitioners. So in terms of mainstreaming conservation, social science, and social issues, and also the importance of stakeholder engagement. So we need, more projects like this to strengthen the capacity as well as interest further. In terms of the topical insights, so obviously EU nature restoration regulation provides some of the mandatory requirement for stakeholder engagement, but it is just the first step as the various member states are developing and implementing national restoration plans. Stakeholder engagement needs to be embedded in those planning and implementation. The other aspect is about, obviously, in terms of, there is a stakeholder engagement is not a one-off thing to like tick box exercise. It has to happen from right from the beginning of the scoping and design to implementation to monitoring and evaluation during the whole of policy and project cycles. And also, obviously, especially for restoration practitioner, obviously, the focus is more on the key stakeholder groups, to highlight in terms of the importance of mapping of the key stakeholders in terms of their interest, relevance, and influence. But some of the hidden or invisible marginal voices, I think, more attention needs to be paid, such as towards the landless people, tenants, women, and other underrepresented groups. So that is another key point to highlight. And also in terms of conflict, there has been, mostly in public perception, there has a negative perceptions of our conflict. But actually what we understand and what we explore is conflict is inevitable. And the key is to identify early in the process in terms of stakeholder conflict and then try to address that in the beginning, so before it becomes visible, and try to transform that, like I said, from incompatibilities and competing interests to how we can come up with and transform that into compatible goals and shared goals. So thank you very much.
Next. So, thank you very much. So I'm Julio Casola. I lead our work on finance and nature at UNEP-WCMC. And for this project, I played the role of the convener of the Ecosystem Restoration Finance Task Force, which was our first convening effort as part of this work, was to bring together a group of people that would be representative, but also not overwhelming, that could advise us on the project and also serve as a sounding board in terms of the direction of travel for this project. And I believe we managed to do that. We brought together a group of around 10 people, both covering practitioners, so people that are actually implementing restoration projects in Europe, and trying to get or getting private funding. We had the European Investment Bank involved, bringing a lot of expertise from the Natural Capital Finance Facility, which is long-term facility that they've run and funding several projects in Europe with a lot of lessons learned. We, of course, have the CCI community of NGOs. So we have Fauna and Flora, bring a lot of expertise on business engagement and engagement with the private sector. We have, of course, RSPB, also developing projects, but also with a broader understanding of the policy landscapes, particularly in the UK, and BirdLife. So on the practitioner side, we have Rewilding Europe and Carpathia, which are two organizations that are also supported by the Endangered landscapes and Seascapes programs. So this was, as I said, the idea of the task force was to serve as this guiding group of people that would advise us on where to go. We started with a broad stakeholder mapping for who are the key stakeholders in Europe that we would like to engage as part of this project. So we needed to convene people. First step, we needed to understand who they are. This is something that was some exchange with the task force members in terms of who are the key organizations we should be approaching as part of this. Also, the decision to focus on private finance in particular was part of the discussions of the task force. Understand that there is public finance availability in Europe in general, but which is unlikely to scale up. So there is a need to tap into private finance if we need to scale up the finance for restoration in Europe. Also basing this on a previous project that was also funded by EOSB, that we scoped 400 restoration projects in Europe, and only 5% had some kind of private finance involved. Based on this, so we also had regular meetings with those guys, and this informed the convening events that we organized. So just highlighting two that were mentioned briefly before. We've kind of tapped into different type of audience here. So the idea was to bring different perspectives into the project. So we organized first the event in the Nature Action Dialogues in Cambridge last year, which it's an event mainly focusing on bringing together the conservation community with private sector. We had roundtables of around 50 people involved in different breakouts, tried to test the ideas as part of the task force before. We had identified some key intervention areas that we would like to explore as part of this work. So we first tested the ideas in the Nature Action Dialogues. And later in the year, we had the Society and Ecological Restoration event in Estonia. It's kind of more practitioner and academic community, kind of bringing that perspective that we collected as part of this business and financial sector engagement to that discussion as well. This all fed into key project deliverables. We will only mention here because my colleague Giacomo will go into the details. We released earlier this year a guidebook for project developers on private finance for restoration with an European focus, but it's actually applicable more broadly than that. And this is all informed by those convening efforts, both in the context of the discussions we had with the task force, but also in the events. And this piece on publishing the Restoration Ecology Journal was also mentioned before. So the playbook is really the main output of this, of the task force work and the convening events that we organized. And I will now hand over to my colleague Giacomo, who will be able to provide more details on what it is. And you have the QR code there for the resource itself.
Thanks, Rodrigo. I'm going to talk about the playbook for restoration project developers on private finance in Europe. So in the playbook, really, we aim to inform project developers on what the available sources of private finance are, whether and how this can support with project design, project implementation in Europe to meet national and international targets on climate, biodiversity, livelihoods. So first, the playbook looks at 4 motivations that drive private finance for restoration, and essentially framing it as the decision to provide finance for a specific project can be justified by one or more of these motivations. And the playbook provides clear examples of projects under each one of these motivations they're not mutually exclusive. But yeah, being familiar, the idea is that being familiar with these drivers and applying them to specific national, regional and local contexts can then help developers design their projects to increase the potential of receiving private finance if they wish to do so. So private finance actors can support ecosystem restorations because they are mandated or incentivized by policy instruments. There's examples on environmental offset, impact offsetting across Europe that can lead companies in specific sectors such as mining, energy, real estate to support restoration also beyond their own development sites. There's also like regulation for financial institutions such as the EU taxonomy that aims to drive more investments into restoration activities. We also look at the motivation of improving social license and addressing reputational risks through voluntary measures. So we looked at companies such as Microsoft, Ørsted, Salesforce. They all have provided support to restoration projects in Europe as part of their corporate social responsibility or nature and climate strategies. And in this case, projects, for instance, can take places in locations where the companies run operations. Then we have tackling nature-related dependencies through supply chain and land use investments. So this is all for cost efficiencies, for sustainability improvements, and we have examples on that as well. And then finally, also generating revenues through nature markets as a final driver. And in this case, private actors really look at restoration activities that then result in the sales of certified products and services. So we looked at examples such as Rewilding Europe that has provided loans to projects that plan to generate revenues through sustainable forest management or oyster restoration activities. We then look at different types of private finance options with the aim of letting developers sort of familiarize themselves with different categories. We differentiate between non-repayable finance or corporate funding, for instance, and from repayable finance and equity instruments that focus much more on the profitability aspect. And then we also included blended finance as a distinct option, whereby concessional non-repayable finance generally extended by a public or philanthropic organization can then be leveraged to attract commercial private finance. So what we did was to then kind of link the motivations, the private finance motivations to provide finance for ecosystem restoration to these finance options to let developers understand what sort of finance they can expect depending on the motivation as well. So very simply, but like if a company is looking to strengthen social license to operate on a specific location, it might favor corporate funding over commercial finance. If financial institutions aim to make profits or to gain a return on investment, then they will opt for repayable finance options. And then we look at also risks, opportunities coming from different kinds of finance as well. But yeah, essentially, we then see that appropriate private finance options will also be determined by the specifics of each restoration projects, of course. So for instance, the project ability to generate revenues is for private finance, generally speaking, for repayable private finance. Developers should outline, the restoration project with a business plan. So details on how to put it together are provided also in the playbook with tips and resources on how to meet the financial and impact expectations of different potential funders and financiers. And more specifically, we look at risks and opportunities, financial analysis, impact monitoring and verifications, and how to select appropriate legal structures. We leave resources on all of these various points of the business plan. And then we conclude the playbook by looking at innovative and collaborative approaches that project developers can consider when designing and implementing their restoration projects. And the approaches are meant to sort of go around some of the usual challenges that come up time and again when trying to access private finance for restoration action, small project sizes, high upfront costs, lack of resources. So we look at what exists, what is out there in Europe. So we see that, for instance, there's specific tailored funds and facilities that exist around specific themes such as sustainable forestry, water management, regenerative agriculture. So possibilities for project developers to look to integrate their projects within these these initiatives. There's, for instance, climate asset management, natural capital fund, TNC's water funds, other sort of specialized asset managers that are starting to have thematic funds that incorporate restoration as well to an extent. And then we have another option is to integrate restoration projects within landscape level initiatives. And there's organizations that are listed in the playbook, such as Common Land, Landscape Finance Lab, trying to do this aggregation landscape level work. And also we looked at matchmaking platforms linking projects, restoration projects to potential funders and financiers. And we list the ones that we found through our research: Restore, Etiforce, Wow Nature, the Green Finance Institute as one as well. And then we also look at these specialized accelerators or incubators that are coming up that help to provide technical assistance for developers and aiming to build skills and knowledge within the project team. There's the Wilding Europe Capital, the UK Nature Accelerator, a few other ones coming up, but basically, kind of the idea is to provide grants or concessional finance to build in the internal capacities to then make the projects investable or bankable. But yeah, and then one final contribution that we put forward in the restoration playbook is to present 5 case studies of projects that have received or are planning to receive private finance to sustain their operations. And for each one of these cases, we list the sources of finance that they've received, the private sector involvement drivers, and we allowed the developers to also talk about some of the lessons learned when engaging with private finance actors. And so we have we have a case study with Triodos Bank. It's a loan product for sustainable agriculture that has a component of restoration. We have corporate funding, so for an RSPB peatland project in Scotland from a whiskey company, and then we have the Nature Conservancy, more blended finance model in Norfolk. We have a project from Rewilding Spain, where they're aiming to develop carbon credits to then sell to corporate buyers. And then we have a project from Nature Returns, which is this philanthropic organization that it's trying to involve businesses and entrepreneurs in nature conservation and restoration activities in protected areas. But yeah, I think this sort of concludes the very quick run through of what's in the playbook, but yeah, happy to take questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. What a run of presentations. That was quite something. And of course, it's taken us a bit over time, but I think for good reason. So I just want to offer just a few remarks, and then we'll open up for a brief Q&A, but we can also carry on with that over informal networking afterwards. So first of all, it's congratulations, not just for a brilliant seminar and for bringing these speakers together, but also for a fantastic set of achievements in convening over the last few years. And I think what's super impressive is both the process, which has been so genuinely collaborative, and I think, as we've heard, that is not easy, and convening itself is very difficult. It's more than just organizing a workshop, it's organizing a run of workshops, it's bringing different interests and stakeholders together, it's maintaining momentum. But it's also been, this has been a collaboration and a process that has generated some really useful outputs, as we've seen: handbooks, guidance notes, academic papers. So it's not just been about collaboration for its own sake. It's been about collaboration to do something and really advance the debates about restoration, particularly across Europe. I think it's also been a superb example of what CCI really stands for, because we are all about collaboration. And it's great to see examples like this, which involve multiple partners across the conservation organisations, university members, the executive directors team and the ELSP team. And it's fantastic to see that. I think it really shows how, by working together around huge challenges like nature restoration in the context of Europe, we can be more than the sum of our parts. And that's certainly what the ambition of CCI is, to be more often, more of the time. And I think we've got a fabulous example here. There's a future. You heard a little bit about where this particular collaboration hopes to go in terms of taking this forward into being a really sustaining community practice. But we also agreed at the beginning of this calendar year that what we're calling transformative restoration should be a core priority for CCI as a whole. And we have a task team which is taking forward that work. There's a big overlap with some of the members of this community of practice, and I hope that relationship will continue. But we'll soon be bringing on board an external consultant to carry out a niche mapping exercise focused on where CCI can add most value to global restoration efforts. And I think what's been done in relation to Europe through this particular convening will certainly be a big part of that consultancy exercise. We're also kicking off a new series of restoration dialogues from the autumn, 5 which are already scheduled on some really interesting themes, and a new call which will be coming out shortly for further themes on which the CCI community and external partners will really help to forward the debate in a really key area. So it's my great pleasure and privilege as Executive Director of CCI to kind of help to catalyse or certainly watch with wonder and pleasure these collaborative activities unfold across our community. And it couldn't be more important and a more key part of what we do. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone who joined us again, and thank our online audience too. And I'm very happy to open up the Q&A session of this seminar. So I'd like to invite all the people who've spoken to come up here and join us at the front. And I think we'll just take a short round of questions. So people either from our online audience or from the floor, perhaps anything you would like to ask or a comment you'd like to make, and just quite quickly, and then I'll turn back to the panel for any quick final comments. But we will also then, those of you who are here in the room, I'd like to invite you all to move next door while we can continue the discussion over a drink. So anyone either in the room or online, perhaps Jack, if you could monitor that. Do you have anything you'd like to ask or a comment you'd like to make at this point? Yeah, and please, people could introduce themselves as well, so we know who each other are.
Simi Bezeng from the RSPB. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. For our first meeting, I listened to a lot of the discussions with interest, because we work on the flyway, the East Atlantic flyway, and we look at key sites that are important for migratory land birds. And in Ghana, particularly where we work, we are dealing with the situation. So I listened to the conflict working. We are dealing with a situation where we are implementing a community-led restoration project. 3 communities involved. 2 are very much involved in the restoration. 1 is resisting because of historical challenges with the government agency that created the national park. So they were forcibly removed from the national park to create the national park. And so they have that resistance to be able to involve. I would like to more discuss with you or collaborate with you, especially putting out the landscape as an important place where we look at some of those conflicts with communities that are resisting to be involved in community-led conservation, and how we can use the recommendations from your task force to be able to address those kind of situations.
Great question. Let's see if there are any more. And also, Jack, is there anything that's come through from our online audience?
We had one question saying much appreciation for the work with finance for restoration. How is this work dealing with the risk of greenwashing? Cynical approaches could damage the good work and good intentions of others.
Yeah, another really good question. Yeah.
I was just curious, were there any structural solutions that had emerged for any of the 3 barriers that you felt like might lead to cascading or transformative change within Europe? Any insights that emerged?
Key barriers, great. Yeah, I'll come to, did you want to ask?
Yeah, just building on the stakeholder conflict one. I think be interesting also to hear your thoughts on how we bring landowners and land managers with us on this. As I don't think we're particularly good as a community at working with farmers rather than talking at them. So thinking a bit more about that would be interesting.
Fantastic. And I think one last one. Yeah.
I have a question, I think, for Anushri. You mentioned the scoping point. So I was just trying to understand, when you talk about scoping, how to ensure you're not just how to say, do you think there is a risk of convening too early before adequate scoping has revealed the fundamental tensions between stakeholders? And how do you balance the urgency of action with the need for thorough preparation before you do anything with the stakeholders?
Right. So I think we'll just run maybe along the panel in the order that you're sitting here, and just pick up on whichever question or two you feel is most relevant to your own interests.
Okay, so thank you very much. In terms of the stakeholder engagement, yeah, I'm happy to share some of the learnings from the stakeholder engagement task force as well. Actually, as I mentioned, the output is almost finalized, and the output, I think some of the case studies you might be able to relate as well some of the things about the cases that deals with some of the historical cases of land use conflict in some part of Europe, and then also we provide some further toolkit and guidance that are available. So links to that, so you can use, and also in terms of our own work within BirdLife as well, we have these participation assessment toolkit. How to do better, why we need to invest more time in terms of understanding different types of these stakeholders and understanding their relevance, interest, influence, and that helps in terms of addressing the conflict part as well, and then change that into more cooperation. So dynamics of conflict there are actually some useful case studies within the guidance document as well, so you might be able to find it useful. Yeah, I'll just start with that. I covered other questions.
Right, we'll share the questions out, and I'm sure we're between people and their drinks, so we'll keep it quite brief in here. Anushri.
Thank you so much. I think I'll take the one on scoping first. We spent at least a year on just the scoping. There was pre-scoping that was done. There was scoping that was done with the task force, with bilateral conversations. I completely take the point that it can't be perfect, but we didn't go into workshops before we've done that scoping. And it was actually something that was not part of the original project plan maybe, but we amended the work plan because we take into account from the very first months that we needed to give that time. And I think we had wonderful partners and funders at ELSP who understood and worked with us on the fact that convening takes time, scoping is important, and we can't rush into something. So it was amazing to see that engagement that built up, the trust that built up with the task force members, and then we went out and we continued that convening with external people. So I think there was, in the 2.5-year project, we spent maybe 1.5 years just scoping and defining what is it that we would do before we even spoke to people in the convening workshops. And we feel that, of course, this could have been a longer project, but in the time that we had, with the resources that we had, I think we amended the work plan to be quite adaptable to allow for that. Thank you.
Yeah, perhaps I will pick the online one around greenwashing. It's a risk. It's stated as a risk in the playbook itself. It's around selecting your partners. It won't necessarily apply to all the motivations for private sector engagement in financing restoration as well. So you of course you have here in the UK, for instance, the biodiversity netting market, which is a compliance regulated market. So it's not around companies doing good and showcasing. It's around companies complying with regulatory requirements, which is quite different. It will largely apply in the case of when you're dealing with corporate social responsibility type of projects. And yeah, I guess what we advise in the playbook, and Giacomo can complement, is largely around doing due diligence, doing the checks, but then it shouldn't be an obstacle for us to work with the private sector. To be honest, there are very interesting projects. Many of the conservation organizations as part of CCI have long experience in working with private sector stakeholders as well. So it's a risk, but there's a risk that's worth it, because to change things, you need to change it from where the impact is being caused, and that largely involves working with the companies.
And we just to close, we do have all of the section on due diligence, on integrity, on just considering making sure that, you know, the partnership with the private sector actor makes sense to your project, if the project wants to seek this sort of finance as well.
Wonderful. Laura, is there anything you'd like to pick up on? No, okay. So once again, let's have a big clap for our panel. A final quick note for me, a thank you again to all our speakers, and thank you to everyone for coming, especially on this warm afternoon.